Okay, so we're here today this is the day after Rosh Chodesh, Mar Cheshvan.
Second day.
Second day. Sitting with Yaakov Harris, a friend, a coworker, but also, as we were kind of just now talking about, there are certain things that were taught growing up, especially in my household. My father was very into Kabbalah, into Chassidus, and he would always talk about these things that to us seemed very magical and mystical and superstitious even.
Mm-hmm.
He would talk oftentimes about seeing the sparks and seeing the light in the letters that the world has been created out of. And as an individual, as a son, you believe your father, but also there's this level of, okay, how much of this is reality and how much of it is kind of his own way of describing his life. And then I met you, and I saw that you had a very similar way of approaching life and Torah and Chassidus, and where even what I see as the deeper realms they're right there for you. Like, it makes sense. So we started talking about all these concepts, and then as we got into me wanting to pursue that which I'm looking to pursue and build, and really even just have a deeper understanding, I figured we'd sit down and have this discussion around Tishrei and Mar Cheshvan, and the idea that time within Torah, it's not a linear thing. It's not 1990, 1991, etc., but rather the months repeat, and there's energies attached to them. So that's really why we're here today.
Even the word for a year in Torah is shana, which literally means to repeat. Doesn't, like we said, lishna is to learn Torah. It means to repeat Torah, to constantly chazer v'shana ba, right? To constantly be repeating. That's why that's separate than a month, because a month is a chodesh. It's new. The concept of a chodesh, that every month has new energies that arise, while every year is those new energies composed of 12. Those 12 new energies that keep happening, they keep repeating themselves.
Okay, so let's start with this. How did you get into all this and this? Because I mean, I personally believe, maybe I'm just jaded. I feel like there's many people out there who talk this stuff. They don't necessarily live it or feel it or believe it. Like, oh, Tishrei is the month. And I'm speaking of myself. Tishrei is the month of Simcha, right?
Right.
You're supposed to be spiritually connected to God.
Right.
If I'm being honest, oftentimes I don't feel that. If I'm davening from the Yom, sure, I feel it in a different way. If I'm doing certain things, but just in general, it doesn't feel like that. Now, obviously, there are many people who do walk around feeling that, and they are able to connect to those energies or to the month.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get started in this? Like, how did this become a real thing for you beyond just the talk of it?
Good question. So, I would say, to preface, that we ask Hashem often in our tefillos that that Hashem should teach us Hashem should give us our portion in His Torah, and one of the things that I think every single person has specific Torah that Hashem teaches them at specific times if they are open to it. And a person can be more open, person can be less open. But I think automatically, just throughout conversations that people have, whenever they're with fellow Jews and fellow Yidden and Chavrusas or whatever, there's Hashem is always teaching us Torah, and specifically the Torah that we need to hear at that exact moment. And so what I came to, what happened to me, I probably started maybe around 3 years ago in Tammuz, where, I guess, let me take a step back for 1 second before I get to the specific months. So what I found often would happen is different themes would arise in the Torah that I would get taught, meaning in the Torah I would be learning with a friend that same thing was referenced in that. And like, I started like making all these connections, like, oh, like all these different Torahs, kind of are all piecing together a bigger face and image, a more core. All these different parts are correlating to come up with these different, with a more succinct and profound idea that just one point of it wouldn't really be able to capture the idea. It's kind of all of the different points create an image, almost like a constellation. Actually, you have all these different stars, but then they connect and they became a constellated image. And so I started coming across Torah along those lines, just in different things, different ideas that would correlate. And then about 3 years ago, during Tammuz time, that same sort of thing happened where all these different pieces of Torah were coming at me. And I came to realize that they were all deeply correlated to the month of Tammuz. And that was the first month that I came to really start understanding the energies, and I came to really even understand, there's like energies to understand as it comes to the month.
So this is throughout the year, everything was pointing towards Tammuz and
no,
or is it all
Tammuz
happened
happened in Tammuz. Yeah, exactly. And so there's a special place in my heart specifically regarding Tammuz, when it comes to the Torah of Tammuz and all of that. But then as I had like this awareness that awoke within me of, there's energies of the month and there's Torah of the month. My eyes were open for all the consecutive months after that. And certain months were much easier for me to like correlate that face. And certain months were much harder. And honestly, I mean, the way it still is for me, every single shana, every single repetition that I glean so much more insights because I have all of my previous understanding from the year before, and then I'm just building off all the new Torah that's being taught to me in this month. And so, am I an expert on any of this? Not at all.
But you do seem to be more in tune. So can you explain kind of how things were different from before you had that awareness to how they are now? Like, what, practically speaking, what changed?
So I would maybe reference the idea of a constellation again, because a lot of this is surrounding the concept of stars and the mazel, and I do want to get to that exactly to differentiate, because it could be a thin line between avodah zarah and the true Torah ideology. But I think the best way to say like how it changed my life is that it's now I have more direction. It's almost like if you're a seafarer, on a ship in the ocean, and you're trying to get to your place wherever you want to go. If you're looking down at the waves, you're not getting there. The only way you can navigate yourself appropriately is if you understand where you're going as it relates to the stars. Right now, I mean, or really, you just need some form of navigation. Now, the way that they used to do it is they utilize stars, right? And so the mazalos themselves are a navigating force, or they can be utilized to navigate your life. And so modern day, I'm not out on the ocean, but I am in the ocean of reality. And to understand that this month is upcoming and understand the energies of this month and what is going to arise, it's going to arise no matter what, because that's just what these energies are. And the question is, how do I deal with them the best way? And what hurt me last year and what was helpful last year? And so it's practically useful and helpful to know what can be coming, what's coming, and then when you're in it, to know how to best manifest what you're trying to manifest according to the energies of your. Like, I kind of like to think of the world in reality is like one big energetic soup, and all these different waves are coming at you from these different directions, and to be able to navigate it, to know what's coming at you and to know what you're involved in can be very helpful.
So it's interesting because you say that Tammuz is a month that has a lot of meaning, which I think for most people, when they think of Tammuz, they think of all the negativity.
It is a very tragic month.
Right. So, we can clearly say that there is this idea of energies and that certain things are going to happen during certain months. Because you look at Jewish history, Tammuz is that month. So what about Tammuz seems to give you the opposite? That
it's not an opposite.
So you're aware that Tammuz is a tragic month.
I'm the most aware, yeah.
So how does that impact your life then during the month of Tammuz? Like, what are you preparing yourself for?
Because
I think we talked about this in the office briefly, and you had a very different kind of spin on it.
So I embrace it, and I allow the energies in fully, and I try to manifest my avodah and my day-to-day avodah to be aligned with that. So, just for example, one of the first things that I came to understand about Tammuz is that I would just cry very easily in Tammuz. I would cry very easily. And when I came to understand that that's actually one of the big avodas in Tammuz, it's all about crying. It's all about crying over the Beis Hamikdash. It's about crying. Even the name Tammuz is deeply associated with the deity, that the way it says in I think Yeshaya, these women would make Tammuz cry, and has without getting too much into Tammuz, because I'm not in Tammuz right now, it has a lot to do with crying, and has a lot to do with tapping into the tragedy of life. And so as I'm just healing, as I'm just a human being who's on a healing journey, because we all get traumatized and hurt in life in some way, I found Tammuz to be an incredibly healing month, because that is a time when certain parts of myself that are deeply and profoundly wounded, that I never really got to feel that pain and feel that wound and feel that tragedy, those pains and tragedies arise in the time of Tammuz, and I find myself weeping for hours in Tammuz, just getting out all these emotions that don't really have a good time and place to come out. Tammuz is an ideal for it. Tammuz is really good, and so it's not necessarily a fun time in my life. I'm not enjoying Tammuz. I'm not like, well, and I might be enjoying it in some way, because in some way it's very relieving to, when you have a 3-hour weep session, and you just you feel just raw and naked and like a baby afterwards. You feel cleansed.
Oh, crying is very cleansing. Yes.
Very cleansing, exactly. And so that's kind of what I mean to dive into the energies and utilize the energies correctly. And you could cry. I cry about my own pain. I cry about other people's pain. Just a time to cry about pain and to feel pain.
So understanding what that month's, I guess, nature is, and embracing whatever that, it may not be a positive thing, may not be a negative thing. It just it is what it is.
Ultimately, they're all going to be connected to growing. You could all grow through all of them, because that's what life is. We're all growing. But yeah, it might not be in the simple sense of happy or sad. Like, it might not be most fun.
So it's interesting, because I recently had passed away. I think we're about a year and a half ago now. He took his own life, and I was reflecting on it and kind of what I wanted to do to honor him. And I was going through old text messages with him, and I noticed at one point, in preparation for one of these weekend retreats that he'd been trying to get me to go to for a while, I had texted him, because I had watched some sort of documentary, and it was about somebody who passed away because of cancer, and it really struck a chord with me. And for, I started crying, and I was sharing this with him, as that was something I hadn't been able to do for a very long time.
What you're saying, to cry,
to be able to just to cry, like I have something I held in, and to have that awareness, like, oh, crying is not a bad thing. And I even told him, like, I felt much lighter afterwards. So it's just a little bit of a side point to bring up. So then, talking about the months, we're coming out of Tishrei and we're going into Mar Cheshvan. I heard something very interesting in Shul this past week, and we were all just standing around, and one of the guys said, yeah, this Mar Cheshvan really is a Mar Cheshvan. I'm already feeling it. So again, we know just on a surface level, Tishrei is the highlight of the year. It's a spiritual elevation. And then Mar Cheshvan, you come into essentially nothing. There's bitterness. Mar Cheshvan. What is the energies that surround Tishrei? What is the month of Tishrei supposed to look and feel like? Similar to, like you said, Tammuz is, well, in many ways, it's that month of healing. It's that month where things are going to come up. What's really the month of Tishrei? What's it built around? What are some of the things that we should be looking into to tapping into? And then let's transition into Cheshvan and Mar Cheshvan, where we are now.
Great questions. So just to preface, to understand something, you have to kind of be outside of it, and then you look at it and you examine it, and you can understand it when you're outside of it. But if you're inside of something, it can be very hard to truly, for a fish living in the water, can you understand water? We can examine what water is because we don't live in water, right? So the reason why I say that is because, just to preface that, the months are something that, it's such a profound part of creation, such a profound part of reality. It's so big and so multifaceted and so profoundly huge on a fundamental level that it's very hard to just say capture, okay, hey, this is these are the energies of the month,
Okay.
and this is where it's at. We can talk for hours and hours and hours and like circumambulate, the ideas that we want to get to, and the best that we can do is kind of start creating like a face with those different points,
Okay.
As I think that's just an important part to preface that, like, when we're dealing with something so fundamental and so big to reality, like one of the energies of the months, it's very hard to just be like, these are the energies. And I think that's important because we have to understand really how Yesodistic, how foundational these things are. Like in the Sefer Yetzirah, it brings down that all reality is created through letters. As we know, that Hashem spoke the world into existence, and so the 22 Hebrew letters are the building blocks for all reality. And so the letters are also connected to numbers, because there's gematria and stuff. And just to give you an idea of how like fundamental a concept is, like, can you imagine living in a world where there's no such thing as the number 2 on all levels?
No,
it's completely unfathomable.
Right.
Completely. It's not, we can't even begin to talk. That's how deeply entrenched we are in the reality too. So we're similarly deeply entrenched in the reality of the months. Okay. So we're speaking of the reality. We're trying to give understanding and awareness, but we're standing in it. So I think it's just important to preface that we can only really glean insights. We can't really grasp the thing.
Meaning somebody listening to this is not going to come away and now have the whole year planned out.
Exactly. Don't be like, okay,
hopefully,
exactly. Again, that's why it's connected to the concept of Shana. Every single year we want to gain more and more insights because we are repeating similar energies, but they're so big, like we're in it. We're in it.
So really, what can and should we start paying attention to, even I guess after the fact? Like now that we are in Cheshvan, what can I go back and look at in Tishrei and notice that, hey, this is the energy of Tishrei?
Great questions. Okay, so anyway, coming back to your original question. So Tishrei is, so again, there's so many angles, I don't know. I guess I'll just talk.
Yeah.
Tishrei is the first month of the year. Even though for us Jews, we have our own Rosh Chodesh and Tielachem, we have our own month of Nisan, which is our first year. But that's the Rosh Hashanah for Jews. But as a collective, as for the world, Tishrei is the Rosh. And so what it means to be a Rosh, anytime you have Rosh Hashanah, you have Rosh Chodesh, the Rosh is the head. And so it's not just the start or just the beginning. The way the body works is everything is commanded and follows the head, right? It's commanded by the head. So you want to move your hand, the Rosh is the one that's really it. The idea started in my head. It then got translated from my head to my body, and it's like the control seat of everything. And so you could say that the Rosh is something that everything is compacted in a nutshell into the Rosh. And so the Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the year, you have the entire year packed into that one day,
right?
In seed form, which is why it's such an incredibly powerful day. And so that concept of Rosh applies to the actual day of Rosh Hashanah, but it also applies to the entire month in general. That the month of Tishrei is a month of great potential in like seed-like form. It has a lot to do with great aspirations, everything that can become, everything that will play out this year is in some form manifested already in Tishrei, right? And that's why it's so jam-packed. You have so many different avodas. You've got like Tshuva Me'ava, Tshuva Me'ira, you got Yom Kippur, and then you got all these major simchas, you got Hashanahs, you got so many things happening because in some way it's encapsulating all of the avodas that we're gonna do throughout the rest of the year.
Now, is that in the form of, I guess you could say, prophetic? Like, if you notice something that happened in Tishrei, therefore that's what's going to happen the rest of the year? Or is it more in the form of intentionality? If I'm intentional with this thing and during Rosh Hashanah, during Tishrei, then that is what I can expect to see. At the end of the day, I don't think it's really about things that's going to happen to you. It's more again, nothing just happens. You have to put in the work. But how does that play out then?
So I would say it's both. It's all of the above. I would say that intentionality is important. I also think that Rabbis Machshav is blevish. We have a lot of what we intend oftentimes. Sometimes we may give more importance to our intentions than what actually is. Not to take away importance of intention, because for our life and for us to feel have meaning and motivated, we need to have good goals. We need to have good intentions. That's very important for us. But in reality itself, you'll never really know how your Rosh Hashanah is going to play out. A lot of people have different ideas. This is what I want my Rosh Hashanah to be, and it's something completely different. And the reason why it's something completely different is because your year is going to be not what you think, right? The way your actual Rosh Hashanah and Tishrei and everything plays out, that's holding the seed. We live in the Olam Hasiyah. So what's down here, what our experience, physical experience is, what we're doing, also what we're thinking. Thinking is also very important. It's all part of it. That's kind of what's going to hold energy. Best of your Tishrei, and to make the best of your Rosh Hashanah, and that's why the avodas of Tishrei are set up by Chazal in just an amazingly perfect way to facilitate that. But I'm not sure if I answered your question. What was your question?
Yeah. Okay. So then going back to the concept that Rosh Hashanah it's the head of the year, so it's planting the seed for the rest of the year. That's throughout Tishrei, or that's specifically Rosh Hashanah, and then Yom Kippur has its own?
So Rosh Hashanah is the main seed for the entire year. That's the whole year is held inside Rosh Hashanah, but the whole energy of the month, because Rosh Hashanah is also the Rosh Chodesh for Tishrei, right?
Right.
And so every Rosh Chodesh of the month holds the entire energy of that Chodesh inside that one day. Right. And so the whole Chodesh of Tishrei is also deeply connected to the concept of Rosh for the whole year. Okay. So even on the 7th of Tishrei and the 15th of Tishrei, we're still deeply connected to the aspirations and ideals of what can be. This is why there's a really interesting halacha in Shulchan Aruch, probably like the most kabbalistic halacha that I know of. It says something, I think it's like on Hoshana Rabbah night, if you can see your shadow, that there's original ground time, something like this. Weird, right? I can't remember exactly what, but it says something like, if you can see your shadow, then you'll know that like your avodas of tshuva and slichas and everything was misgaba, something like that, or I don't quote me on this. Right. I can't remember exactly what, but it's something to do like that. And the reason why it's such an interesting halacha is found in Shulchan Aruch is because that's one of the big themes of Sukkot is connected to the concept. And without getting too much into what the idea of sale is kabbalistically and whatever and whatnot, sale is very connected to what can be, which is it's kind of like, because it's a projection, right? So I put my hand on the light, and then you see that it's not the thing itself, but it's a projection, and it's an image making force of what can be. I'm not sure I'm expressing this point or so well, but the point is that the concept of sitting in the sukkah for 7 days and having all the shpiz in there, and it's almost like we fantasize about what we can do. We fantasize about my gvura, we fantasize about my chesed, we fantasize about, it's all about fantasy and what can be, right? And so what the halakha is saying, like, if you saw your tzeil, if you can see that projection force, if you can see that image that you've been fantasizing about, then you know that everything that you're trying to make happen will actually happen, right? And so it's very much connected to like all your aspirations, everything big. It's all massive, big picture. Right. Tishrei is just huge picture. It's just the beginning, and then that's partly why we translate to when we transition to Mar Cheshvan, it's so crushing in some way, because you're not, besides from Mar Cheshvan being like the lowest of the low, it just is. We also are coming from the highest of the high. You're coming off Simchas Torah, which is like the highest aspirations. You're holding at the highest level of simcha. You're holding at the highest level of like dveikus and everything that you probably will be able to attain that year. And then you crash all the way down. Twofold, because Cheshvan is very connected to the heel. It's very connected. The mazel of the month is called Akrav, which has the same exact letters as Akev in it, and it's connected to the letter Nun, which means multiple things, but it also means just fallen, to be neufel. And so like Mar Cheshvan is mamish the bottom of where we're starting from. We're actually starting here. It's the most practical. Mar Cheshvan is probably the most down to earth. I mean that literally. Month. It is the most practical month. The letter Nun, which is what rules the month of Cheshvan, is in Aramaic also means Malchus. It means government. And government, the things of Malchus, the things of government are always the most practical. They're not there to do it. They're there for day to day, you know. And Tishrei is the highest of all aspirations. Great madrigas, great moichin, great understanding. But it's like, but it's chag, you know. We're not doing anything practical. It's all, and then we go down to the lowest of the low, the most practical, and so there's a big difference there.
So it's interesting because like that has been my last 2 weeks, I would say, throughout the entire Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. I was on it. I wouldn't necessarily say it was like a spiritual high, or maybe it was, but I guess in the ideation of things, you know, exactly. Like I'm gonna do this French, I'm gonna do the yeshiva program. I'm like all these 1,000 million ideas that I've always dreamed and never wanted. And like I finally, and I even had like this awakening at one point, which I've told a couple people about, like, you know, that's it. My thing moving forward. Yeah, I have my job, but my thing moving forward for whatever reason, and I told you that that's like, I've got to create a nonprofit, and I've got to start hosting events in our house. Like that is a thing. Beautiful. And then comes the end of Tishrei and now Mar Cheshvan, and it's been like this, what I call depressive 2 weeks.
Yeah. And
it's like, well, how am I going to do it? How am I going to get to that ranch if I'm still in this situation? What am I going to do with my financials if, you know, I'm in my situation right now? But what I'm hearing is, you know, again, Tishrei is create those ideas, be in tune with, I guess, really what I feel is my neshama, or God is telling me, like, this is what you are meant to do. But then down to earth is, okay, now how do we do it? The earth is where we build the foundation.
Exactly.
So Mar Cheshvan, I guess, is when we start building that foundation.
That's exactly right. And and you're exactly correct. The correct avodah of Mar Cheshvan is to take the energy and the koiches and the aspiration to Mar Cheshvan and bring all that energy down into the most physical, down to earth start. Because we're starting. The year's starting. The year's starting now, and it starts dreary. It starts dark. Like it is depressive.
It's raining out.
It's literally raining out. And it didn't rain the entire district, not once.
Right.
And it's raining out.
Yeah.
And so the correct avodah, and you know, of connecting Tishrei and Cheshvan, if you just start with Cheshvan, it's going to be it is depressive. It's depressive. It's sad. It doesn't. It's just energy. Like it doesn't feel good. And so you really have to imbue it with the energy of Tishrei and know, like, okay, this. I'm starting from the bottom to grow.
So when you do that, does that mean taking all those ideas, or for each individual? Again, for me, it was all these ideas about what I want to create. Mm-hmm. Is it taking them and turning them into practical steps and actually doing it? Is there a different way of, because we hear the idea all the time of take Tishrei and bring it into Cheshvan the rest of the year. Again, in Chabad, there's the big thing, Yaakov Harris. I think that's how this whole thing started, right? That, okay, now it's that, hit the road, Jack. It's time to get things going.
Right.
So for me, at least in my circumstance, it's this. Like, this had to happen today, and it had to happen right now, because this is taking that and bringing it to the next step.
That's exactly right.
For other people, it might look different, unless, is it really that Mar Cheshvan is whatever it is that you experienced in Tishrei? Take a minute, think about it, focus on it, maybe even write, and then say, okay, how am I going to continue to pursue that?
100%. Yeah. Yes. Mar Cheshvan is the time when the rubber hits the road. It's time to just get started It's time. It's all about practicality in Mar Cheshvan, and it's not so fun. But you have to keep the mission in mind. You have to keep the goal in mind, and then you have to start. You have to start.
Yeah. So then, does it make sense then to also start preparing for Kislev, or is this the sort of thing? Because on the one hand, so we're in Cheshvan now. We're not necessarily going to see it unless we're actively applying ourselves to the situations.
See what? I'm not going to actively see what.
The month or the energies of the month of Cheshvan. I mean, I guess. I mean, you can, because if the whole purpose is to get going and to really to dig yourself in, well, then that's what needs to be done. And then I guess next year you say you come back to it in preparation and say, this is what.
Yeah.
This is
Cheshvan. Right. There's so many, and there's so many that we haven't touched upon, and they all kind of, again, piece. This is one of the elements, and this is one of the elements of how Cheshvan relates to Tishrei. There's a lot of stuff here. I think a relevant point is a whole bunch of things, but Cheshvan, it's good to understand that one of there's 2-3 main themes that arise in Cheshvan. One is death. Death is a massive theme of Cheshvan, and this is seen in many places. And really, it's connected to Tishrei Cheshvan there. So one is, the mantle of the month is Akrov. It's the scorpion. Scorpions always in the Torah are associated with death, right? Nachashim, Akrovim, snakes and scorpions. Scorpions, obviously, they are poisonous, right? And they stab you.
Right.
And so, right off the bat, there's like a certain dark energy that is clear in the month. And if you'll notice, Havdalah between things that are kodesh and things that are chol. And sometimes to understand a thing, it's good to understand its opposite, or how it's opposite. It's to understand a concept in kodesh. It could be good to understand the concept of how maybe the whole perspective of it, so it gives light to each other. And so, what's the Jewish perspective on death? And because think about it, we're going into the winter, right? It's dreary and it doesn't feel so good. What's the Jewish concept? How do we deal with it? And the question is, okay, let's take a look how the Goyim deal with it, because the Goyim are also dealing with it,
right?
And as we know, this is if you look on on the decorations, they're celebrating Halloween, right? Or they just did, right? Because the energies of death are in the air, and we must contend with them. They are here. The question is, how do we do that?
Right.
So the way the Goyim do it is they put up these scary things on the outside of their house. Now, whether they know they're doing this intentionally or not, this is what they're doing symbolically. They are attempting to scare away the demons that they're scared of. They're trying to scare away death, and so they're putting all these things to put them away, right? And the Gemara says that by Klal Yisrael, in Sukkot time, we could go outside of our house, and we go outside where it's starting winter, and all the Goyim which have been outside, they're coming back inside, right? And so part of what that's deeply connected to is the difference of how we interact with death and how the Goyim are interacting with death. One of the interesting names of Sukkot, and I'm going off a lot of tangents here, but I'm going to correlate it all. One of the interesting names of Sukkot is Chag HaAsif. It's the Chag of the ingathering. That's what literally that means, because it's the harvest time. It's the reaping time, right? Like the reaper.
Right.
And and what's interesting is that in the Torah, the concept of ha'asif, gathering, we're doing that in many ways, right? We're gathering the Arba Minim, which comes from completely different landscapes. And it's connected to all the different Yidden, whatever, everybody's coming together. It's all achdus, it's all one, right? But the most pashut level is we're taking in all of our grain and putting it into our storehouses for the winter, right? We're all gathering everything in. One of the words for death, though, in the Torah is concept of asif, right? Like when Yaakov dies, when Moshe dies, when Aaron dies. Very interesting. The Chazal say by fish that shchitasan zu asifasan zuhi shchitasan. You don't have to shech them. So it's called the Chag HaAsif, which if you literally take those words, mean it's the Chag of death.
Right.
We're celebrating death. And very interesting concept. Like there's also halachas that reflect this idea that the schach dafka has to be dead, cannot be mechaber l'karka. There's a lot of inyanim of death that once you start looking at it in Sukkot, it's a big inyan. So it's like we're celebrating death. Wow, what's happening here? And so again, the goyim, what they're doing is they recognize that it's the death season, and so they're scared of it, and so they go inside their house and they put out scary things outside their house to hold back the scary things, right? Then when it comes time for their day, what do they do? They have these little kids dressed up as these scary demons, right? Which is the embodiment of death and everything that we don't like. And they come knocking and they say, trick or treat. What does that mean? That means either you give us a treat, whatever exactly that is, or we're going to pelt your house and we're going to hurt you, right? We're going to get a mob to come in and hurt you.
Right.
It's kind of like, it can be understood as the dark things in our life are knocking at our door at this time. And there's, give me what I want. Give me a treat. So to make it literally practical, it could be like, let's say someone trying to go on a diet. And the demon knocks on his door and says, give me food. So you have two options. Either you could say, go away, stay away, and I'm not going to feed you anything. What's going to happen is, most of the time, is a horde of demons are going to come and attack him. So a person might be able to hold off on, their diet for a month. And then because it's so rigid and they haven't fed the demon, they didn't give a treat to the demon at all. They completely, he eats 7 cakes. He cakes he can't handle. So the other way of dealing with it is, okay, fine. You can have a little bit of a candy bar, placate the demon a little bit, now go away. Dark side of me, death, just you could have a little bit of what you want, but go away. That's kind of the symbolic happening of what's going on with Halloween and how the guy interacting with death. And so you see that the entire attitude is associated with stay away. I'm scared of you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'll give you a treat so that you stay away. Now, if we look at how the Yidden interact with this, it's a chag. We're celebrating. We go out into the death and we dance. We say that the Leviathan, which is an embodiment of the dark side, says that the Hashem created and if they would have, he killed the female and he castrated the male. If he would have kept them alive, they would have destroyed the world because of the dark. They embody these things, the demons that we're scared of. And it says that their skin is going to become our sukkah. The whole what the Yidden are doing at this time is we're seeing death and we're seeing that it's that things are dying, right? And we would be scared of it. But what we actually recognize is that death is our greatest friend. It's our ultimate. Became part of life. It became part of our reality. They were supposed to, but death is part of the tree of the tree of life. It's part of it. It's part of the Eitz Hadas. It's part of it. So they wouldn't have died then. What exactly was the grand plan? What was the plan originally? So Chazal basically explained that, like we find in the concept in the prophecies, in the end of days, we talk about this idea of Bila Hamaves Lenatzach, that death will be swallowed forever. It's a very interesting lashon. because it says bila. It will be swallowed, which means that it will be incorporated forever. We will eat death.
Yeah.
Death will be eaten. And what that means is that we will have taken all of the energies of death and all the koiches and will be sholet on death. Instead of death being sholet on us, which is what happened when Adam and Chava ate from the tree in the wrong time, we'll be sholet on death. What exactly does that mean? Well, what does that mean to play out? So it's a little hard to fathom. It's a little hard to really understand because we're not in it. But it has something to do with constantly dying so that we have a constant renewal. Because think about it. The reason why death is our friend, the reason why we have a chag surrounding death, is because without death, there's no renewal. There's no rebirth. There's you didn't have the end of the seasons. You cannot have a renewal. You cannot have a rebirth. Deeply connected to the concept of Yitzchak, which is why Yitzchak is the concept of Yitzchak himself is always deeply connected to Yemot HaMashiach and Olam Haba, the future things, which is why his name means he will laugh, right? And why there's very little things in the Torah about Yitzchak. We don't know so much about him because his whole he's the side of Yemot HaMashiach. His whole secret is that he's embodiment of what will be. And so this past 6,000 years, we haven't really had the Torah of Yitzchak so much. Although the Gemara does say, now, exactly, I don't know when, but the Klal Yisrael is going to turn to our three Avos, and we're going to say, Yitzchak, you are our truest father. We're going to recognize he's our truest father. And so, Sukkot is deeply connected to the concept of, Yemot HaMashiach and Olam Haba, which is why we're reading the Haftarahs of Gog and Magog, which is why we're bringing Karbanos for the 70 nations, why Dafka on Sukkot is the only Chag that all the nations are going to celebrate. Sukkot is very much a time of the end. It's very much connected to that time because, again, it's connected to the time of when we will have incorporated Bila HaMavas Lanetzach. And so there's this Tainig Tamidi Einik Tainig, that a constant pleasure isn't pleasurable anymore. And and that makes a lot of sense, just in general, if you're eating something, right, just too much of it doesn't do anything for you anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so the question arises that we know that one of the main reasons why we're in this world and why Hashem has created us is so that we should, as Messiah Sharm says, have timing on Hashem, and that's the ultimate schar, as explained in Olam Haba, is that just infinite timing on Hashem. Okay, but how exactly does that work? If timing to me the in timing, I guess I have a great revelation, I have a great understanding of God. Okay, but then in 5 minutes, it's not going to be that way anymore. And so it's deeply connected to this yesod of Bila HaMavas. We have, let's say, an infinitely profound comprehension of God, and it brings infinite pleasure. And then in that same second, because we're sholet over this concept of death, we're ruling it. That part of ourself dies. We've self-sacrificed, just like Yitzchak, so that we can have an immediate rebirth that same second, so that we are infinitely going Michael El Chayil, Michael El Chayil, in comprehension and in timing and in understanding. And that is a infinite Olam Habadika concept that will happen when we fully incorporate and Bila HaMavas Lanetzach. We have a whole chag surrounding it, and then it's also deeply connected to Mar Cheshvan, because Cheshvan is it's a time of death. It is the time of death. It's when death is fully, it's the snake. The mazel of is called Akrav. But if you actually look at the stars, there's three mazal. There's a scorpion, there's a snake somewhere else, and then there's another thing. And in secular, astrological ideas, some people claim to say that there's actually 13 astrological signs because the sun does move through Ophiuchus as well, the serpent bearer.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever, without getting too tangented here,
right.
Sorry, bring me back if I'm getting too tangented. The Chazal understand that these three are all part of the mazel of Akrav. Why are we calling it Akrav? Because the scorpion represents the poison of the snake as it bites your heel.
Okay.
And so again, it's connected to the death that the snake brings as it bites our heel. So there's so much death going on in Cheshvan, and it's interesting because what are we supposed to do with death?
Right.
What are we supposed to do with it? Like, how are we supposed to actually deal with it? And because Mar, we translate it as bitter, and it's not a bad translation, but I think a more encompassing translation, at least for our purposes, is it's uncomfortable. Mar is just everything uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So Cheshvan is a time when we deal with all the stuff that we don't want to deal with at all. It's the things that we just don't want to look at, which is why one of the main themes are death, interestingly enough, because sexuality is also, it's a taboo subject.
Right.
And it's any time we're talking about sex, because sexuality is the creative force and death is the destructive force. And so they're always hand in hand. They're always connected to each other. But they're both things that are very uncomfortable. We're also talk a lot about Gehenna. It's the underworld, which is connected to the concept of death. All these things are these concepts that are not fun for us. We don't really want to look at them ever. And Cheshvan is the time when they blare in your face. You cannot not look at them. You cannot not deal with our sexual problems. You cannot not deal with the reality of death. You have to deal with them. And the question is, how are we supposed to? What does Hashem want from us as it relates to these things? By the way, just to explain a little bit the sexual piece, again, that's connected to the snake, right? To the snake and the poison, right? All we know that eating from the tree was part of the big issues, but Chazal explained that's actually a lot to do with sexual sins. And one of the reasons why the snake was so enticing to Chava, because there was a sexual attraction element to his seduction, right? The snake is the seducing mouth.
Right.
Energies of Cheshvan have a lot to do with, like, they're very convincing, like Scorpios, you could say. Like I don't standings of the month and then putting it onto people,
right?
But it can be done, and so a lot of Scorpios are like very convincing. There's a myth. There's a scorpion, and this really encapsulates a lot of the energies of the month. This tale. There's a scorpion that needs to get across the river. And so it asks, like a frog or a turtle, take me across the river. And the turtle's like, I'm not doing that because you'll sting me. And he's like, no, like I can't sting you. If I sting you, I'll drown. Like I need you to survive. So I'm not going to. And the turtle's like, no. Connected to this it's a sexual seduction. He's able to convince because of the sexual raw energy. And he convinces the turtle to take him across. And then he's halfway through and he stings him. And he's like, why? Why would you sting me? You're going to die. And he's like, because I'm a scorpion. That's all I know. And it's like, and so it's very, it's very much like self-destruction. Things that, like, destruction, not just because I want to hurt you for my own gain, just destruction for destruction's sake. Right? The Taninim HaGedolim that we're connecting with this concept of these snakes, they would have destroyed the world. And there would have been no world for them to live in. Right. The whole world, the concept of it's just destruction for destruction's sake. And it's very convincing. Like the snake would have been infinitely better if it didn't cause Adam and Chava from the tree. It would have been way more powerful. It got all these curses for what? Because it's destruction for destruction's sake. And so either way, so getting back to Mar Cheshvan and the uncomfortability with this month and all the uncomfortable things that it brings up, how are we supposed to deal with them? And so the other time that we find this lashon of Mar is by Mur, right? By Pesach. And so I think the Kabbalists bring down over there, or the Sfarim, they bring down that one of the big inyanim of eating maror is the chewing up of the maror. It's connected with the teeth and connected to chewing, and you break it down. And this is insightful because this gives us insight on how we are supposed to deal with things that the way that the Torah tells us to deal with it is break it down, make it manageable, and then incorporate it. Then chew it and eat it. We're supposed to chew and eat death, sex, the underworld, everything that is uncomfortable for us. It comes in this massive boulder that we never want to look at.
Right.
The avoid
Like
of Mar
bite-sized
Cheshvan
pieces.
take bite-sized pieces and then slowly but surely incorporate it, which is why and then eventually we'll get to the point where Bila Hamavas Lanetzach. What does it mean, Bila Hamavas Lanetzach? Are we one day just going to take the entire dark side, the entire Leviathan? No, we've been slowly chewing the Leviathan since the fall, right? Since tree. We've been slowly. Every Mar Cheshvan that comes around, we incorporate a little bit more of death. We incorporate a little bit more of death until Bila Hamavas Lanetzach, meaning that if it's finally, sometimes Lanetzach means like for eternally, which is also true, but it means sometimes like Chuasam Lanetzach. It's finally a Yeshua. Mm-hmm. It's finally incorporated. We finally finished it. And so that's part of the avodas of Mar Cheshvan to like practically think about death, and contemplating our death day can be very, very beneficial for our life. Very beneficial. It's kind of a disgusting thing,
right?
And it's the excrement, but it's very beneficial to life,
right?
It's very beneficial. And interestingly enough, just reminding myself, one of the uncomfortable things that people may experience in some interesting way, in Cheshvan, is also the concept of feces. Feces is an uncomfortable thing, an uncomfortable part of our reality that is connected to this month. The Sefer Tzir brings down that there's a letter connected each month, and there's different organs that connect each month, and one of the organs that connects to the month of Cheshvan is like the intestines that absorb things, and then also excrete I'm just I can't remember how I correlated it all together, but I guess just coming back to the concept of Mar and the uncomfortability. It's an uncomfortable month. It's not fun, but being able to take bite-sized pieces of the things that we don't like this is the type of thing people, if you have your eyes open, people might we might be forced to encounter death in ways that you might not have correlated it to the energies of the month, but like you might know something might die, and different parts of ourselves might die or whatever.
That's an interesting point. Different parts of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
That's something that, one of the coaching programs I was a part of a while back, that was one of the things that they talked about, was making room. Very hard to let go of things, like all these myriad of things I want to do.
Right.
I can't do it all at once, so you got to focus on one thing.
Bite-sized pieces.
Right, bite-sized pieces. So like that's really, again, this whole thing of us sitting down, first of all, us having many more conversations, but I'm going to be doing the same thing with other people. Sit down with them, have a conversation around, because those are bite-sized pieces. It's not paying my bills right now. It's not doing any of these 1,000. It's not impacting 1,000,000 lives. Right. It's not a physical location that I have that people are showing up to, but it's that bite-sized piece and the other thing.
Some of the ideals. Right. Exactly.
And I think one of the things that just came back to me was that I may be letting go and maybe dying a little bit, but inevitably what happens, at least what I've noticed, is that those visions and dreams come back. So this rebirth of, okay, so it's like the whole idea of this ranch that I have. It started off as a physical location to do my coaching, to run a men's program, but now it's turned into so much more because I've set it aside, and then I've gone back to it, and I set it aside and gone back to it every time.
What is the idea of the ranch?
We haven't discussed this. Oh,
I'm not sure.
It's okay. Well,
we could have.
The idea of the ranch is, aside from on a personal level, us having a place that for our families, our kids, with space to grow from the ground the food that we will eat, so that we know what we're taking in, but also to be more connected with our food as well as God.
Beautiful.
At its core, what we want this place to be, the ranch to be, is a place of healing. So we want it to be a place where people will come to it, and we'll have access to therapists, counselors, all the things that they need, but also just a place to at its peak, right? And so we're struggling with this. How do we do that? Because our financial situation doesn't allow it. The fact we both still have jobs that we need to be at right now doesn't allow it.
Right.
But bite-sized pieces, the home that we have in now, which we're extremely grateful for, we open that home now to do that. You and I have spoken about this and looking and just my presence, what that does and what it allows people to do. So again, it's an idea of those bite-sized pieces. So now the challenge is, okay, so in Cheshvan, let me look at Cheshvan. Let me look at this concept of death, because Steve Jobs has his famous saying that one of these commencement speeches, and it was all about, look at your life as if today was your last day. So in the self-help world, in the coaching world, it's always that, and knowing that.
Right. That's very connected to Bila Hamavas Lenetzach.
Right.
If we were to fully incorporate the power of death, what would we look like?
Because it's not a bad thing. It's not a scary thing. It's not a negative thing.
It's not.
It's for the neshama. It's the beginning of the next stage. But then for us, that can be the motivation that we need to get going. Additionally, looking at other people who have passed. Again, this friend that passed, and then my father that passed. I've learned a lot about myself and what I want to do because of the impact that they had or did not have, or the things that they started or did not start.
Exactly.
So this month it shouldn't just be a depressing month.
Then you're coming to the poison of the snake, and it's a dangerous month. It's a dangerous month because it's easily depressionable. It's so easy, and so the real avodah is to look at all the things that you want to get depressed about that are arising in this month, see them, face for them, but then also hold on to the energies of Tishrei, and don't allow yourself to get depressed. Don't allow there. Do whatever you can to get yourself out of it. Don't wallow in it. It's good. Yeah, it's gonna end. It's not gonna end well. It's not gonna be. The way is to. One of the reasons why Cheshvan is called Mar Cheshvan is because Mar means master in Aramaic. Right. And what the sages explain is that your entire year, essentially your entire winter, but probably your entire year is gonna follow how your Cheshvan is going. That's why Cheshvan is the master, because it follows Cheshvan. Because Tishrei is the start of the year, but it's like not
living in dream world.
Yeah, you're living in dream world. You're living in Chag world. It's awesome. It's like, but it's not reality. Akrov, the time of Cheshvan, is the bottom of, because it means you're only going up. But the way is, don't stay on the ground.
Right.
Rise up. Rise up like an eagle. Exactly.
Literally, why did I get the song?
Concepts in Cheshvan. It's also interesting that it's mapped like this in the astrological Torah. There's four arbachayas, right? There's four faces on the chariot, right? The man, the lion, the ox, and the eagle. And so these correspond to the four cardinal signs, the four center signs of the seasons, right? Summer, winter, spring, fall.
Right.
And so, Aquarius, Shvat that is connected to, the man. Leo is connected to the lion, right? The obvious ones are connected to the obvious ones, right? What's interesting is that Scorpio is connected to the eagle. And it's a very interesting concept, because how do you connect? The basic concept is like this, that the eagle is connected Yaakov. and Yaakov is the Pnei Nesher. And the idea basically is that the Nesher flies high, flies the most high, but it rises slowly, so to speak. It also happens to be connected to the phoenix. The concept of the phoenix is actually the Nesher itself, which is why David HaMelech in Tehillim says, "Tischadesh k'nesher ne'ureichi," that Hashem should rejuvenate should rejuvenate my youth like the Nesher. So the Nesher has this powerful concept of dying and then being reborn,
right,
and from those ashes rising high. And so Yaakov is deeply connected to the idea of the heel, right? His name is Yaakov, right? He's connecting to the heel of Esav. And again, Esav, as we know, is the Satan, right? When he's fighting the Sar Shalis, and he's fighting the Satan, and he gets hurt where? In his Yerech, which they say is his thigh, but really it's his sexual organs. That's where he got hurt. So we see this again, this connection between Yaakov and the heel. Again, remember that the Akrav is the same, which is the snake element that he's holding on to Esav's heel. It's the snake element that hurts his sexuality, right? Because all of it's connected. And the avodah of Yaakov is to rise. Yaakov starts from the bottom. He's the heel, and he rises to Yisrael, to Li Rosh. He becomes the head. And the entire story arc of all reality is the story of Yaakov, and he's the only Av that his mitase shleim, his sexuality is pure and it's straight and it's clean, right? All the others have pseilis. Avram has Yishmael, Yitzchak has Esav, Yaakov has 12 shvatim, which are pure and right. And so we said the mitase shleim, his sexuality was good, right? The whole story arc of reality is the concept of is Bnei Yisrael, and in a sense you could say that when Adam and Chava ate from the tree, the grand story arc of life started in Mar Cheshvan, and then we go because everything's cyclical. So things we only go through it once, so to speak.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? And so it started from Mar Cheshvan, and then it ends had Bnei Yisrael. Yeah, but we're getting there, right? Going back into our land. What? Al-Kanfei Nisharim. Right? So from the Akra, from the poison of the snake that we started on the bottom, Yaakov rises into Yisrael, and we go onto the Gula, whether that means on planes, whether that means literally, physically, I don't know what.
Right.
But the point is that Chazal say we go into the land Al-Kanfei Nisharim. That the point is that we rise. We rise and we rise. And so the whole avoid the bottom and soar like an eagle. You don't stay on the bottom. We're starting there, but don't stay there. And it's very important. And it's also, on Kislev, we get a very powerful energy of like,
I was just gonna say,
it's explosive energy. We get to momish explode out of the low energy. Kislev is very helpful for that. That's why it's the arrow, right? And it's ruled by a certain koichov that's very expansive. Whatever, that's for another time. Low energies on Mar Cheshvan. It's not what it's about. It's about rising from the bottom. And, which is awesome.
I think that'll do it. Thank you.
Amazing. Shkoyach.